But let's talk about script kiddies, because this is where a lot of people think that the threat exists. Okay? Well, the thing is that we started dealing with script kiddies. But what happens to kids? They grow up, right? This is a popular script kiddie toy. This was popular back in 1997. What you do, and for background purposes, every computer on the internet has an IP address, its own unique IP address. IP stands for Internet Protocol. Okay? What you do is with this application is you plug in a computer's IP address right here, you type in a message, click this button, and you will cause that remote computer system to crash. It's pretty simple, huh? I mean, anybody can use this tool. Notice how there's no help buttons. You just download it and use it. It's pretty simple. It's like learning how to use a hammer. It's pretty much self-explanatory, right? Well, kids would download this and start crashing computers on the internet. See, hackers go through an evolution. All hackers, they pretty much start off as curious kids playing with computer systems. How does this work? They don't fully understand the computers that they're dealing with. They don't understand the internet. But they're using these tools, these toys. They're having fun. But the thing is that they start to grow up. Here in the United States, the little hackers, they turn into IT people that we all love. They get jobs in the computer industry and that kind of stuff. And as they start to learn and excel, well, they become top-tier hackers. They become experienced programmers. And they know how to identify new vulnerabilities in operating systems. They know how to write code. They know how to program. There's an evolution that takes place. And all these young script kiddies that we were all taught to fear, they've grown up now. Let's talk about viruses, worms, and Trojans. Oh my. Computer viruses, well, they came around back in the 80s. And they required user interaction to activate. An example would be a virus that would infect a Microsoft Word document. Okay? It infects the document, and then when you open up that document, you activate the virus, and it then goes and infects other documents on your computer. You copy that to a floppy, move it to another computer. It infects all the documents on their machine, right? They were very slow to propagate, and most viruses at that point in time were just written to see how far they would spread. I would say 90% of them were, innocuous. They didn't really do much except spread. Well, everything's changed now. Now we have worms. Who here's heard of a worm? We've all heard about worms in the news, right? Worms, they are self-propagating. They will automatically infect any computer system that is not patched because they spread by exploiting vulnerabilities in an operating system. Usually worms don't just come across as just worms themselves. They usually come across with a Trojan horse. Now, who here knows what a Trojan horse is? And I mean like in the City of Troy sense, or if you are a Monty Python fan, a Trojan rabbit. A Trojan horse is any software that gets installed on a computer system that leaves a back door open, enabling a hacker to access that machine at a later date. Trojan horses and worms, they kind of go hand in hand. And they're very serious because there's a lot of money to be made in writing worms. But where's the financial motivation? Where does this money come from? Well, who here has ever heard of this little thing called spam? Well, let's take a look at this. Let's say that I am a spammer. It is my job to get information out to you guys about this new herbal remedy that will make some body part bigger. Okay? Now, what I do is I'm going to set up a server and configure it, and I'm going to start sending out emails. Well, the way that it used to work was they'd start sending out these thousands of emails, and ISPs, what they would do is they would say, hey, all the traffic coming from this computer system right here, well, it's just nothing but spam. blacklist it. They created what they call RBLs, real-time blacklists. And once a spam server got put on this RBL list, well, what they would have to do is they'd have to uproot the server, move it over here, set it back down, reconfigure it, and send off spam again. And then they'd have to do that every 24 hours in order to keep sending out their product. Because see, the thing is that if I send out 50 million emails, how much does that cost me? Nothing. But what if 1% of those people that I send it out to actually clicks on that message? Well, that's 500,000 people, right? And what if 1% of those 500,000 people actually decided to buy my stupid little product? Well, 5,000 people times $50 per transaction. Well, that's as much money as some people make in a year. Outside of the United States, even a couple years. And so as servers got added to these real-time blacklists, we started winning the spam wars. Well, that started cutting into my profit margins. We needed to figure out a way to make a comeback. So this caused the spammers to get a little bit ingenious. They thought about the problem. They went, you know, Microsoft's operating systems, they have a lot of vulnerabilities. What if we were to write a program, a worm, that would use these vulnerabilities on this operating system to infect the computer, and once it infects the computer, it pulls behind it a Trojan horse that will infect that machine, that once that Trojan horse is on that machine, it will make a connection back out to me, the spammer, and I can sit there and tell it a list of email addresses and a list of messages that I want it to send out, and we could actually turn all of these unpatched computer systems on the internet into spam servers. So that's exactly what they did. Turning home computers into spam servers, well, they were back in business. But a lot of people ask me, well, who are these crackers? Who are the spammers? Who are these people? Who's the bad guys? Well, I'll tell you who the bad guys are. It's the Russians. Let's take a look at this. During the entire Cold War, there were technology export restrictions in place where we could not send any of our computer technology to the Soviet Union. In 1991, when the Iron Curtain fell and the Soviet Union collapsed, we were using 386s and 486 computers with Windows 3.1 and DOS. Over there, literally, they were still using a pencil and paper and an abacus to do their accounting. In fact, an adding machine was a luxury over there. All right? Well, as we started replacing our old computer technology with the Pentium machines and Windows 95 and stuff like that, where did all that old technology go? It didn't go into the landfills, but a lot of it went over to the Soviet Union. And as we got connected to the internet and started having kids grow up with these computer systems and go through that script kiddie stage of, you know, playing around with stuff, they were doing the same thing over there. They were getting these ancient computer systems connected to the internet. And as we grew up and we became more technologically savvy, they were doing the same thing over there, just with older technology. Now, over there we have skilled programmers. And because they are skilled programmers, they taught themselves how to program on computer systems that we consider garbage. And because they're using such old technology, this forced them to become very, very good. They're over there. They're skilled programmers, but they can't go out and get a job programming. For all intents and purposes, they are disconnected from the world's economy. So how do they make a living? Any way they can. There's no rules. No holds barred. So, it is now their job to write programs to facilitate spammers. It is now their job to write worms, to write Trojan horses, to make money any way that they possibly can. And that's exactly what they do. And they don't target companies. They target you folks, the end users. Because you see, companies have IT workers, right? I mean, if a worm infects a computer network here, there's IT folks that are on staff to clean the mess up. It's the home computer users that they're targeting. Back in the glory days of computer hacking, it used to be like a status symbol to say, oh, I hacked into the Pentagon. No, not anymore. It is now all about quantity, not quality. It's how many computers can you hack into? How many computers can you control? And these hacking groups that write these worms, it's a big bragging item. The status symbol is how many computers do you have in your botnet or in your zombie network. That's what they're called. All these computer systems that they have under their control, they number in the tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands. And you know what? It's pretty cool. Me, Joe Q Public, I can rent time on their computers, on this botnet that they have. I can become a spammer overnight. How do I pay for it? Well, let's look at that part of the equation. Let me ask you this. All right, here in the United States, we have the United States dollar as our primary currency, right? Well, what is our reserve currency? What do we have stored in our Federal Reserve Bank or in Fort Knox? Gold, right? So, the dollar is our primary currency. Gold is our reserve currency. Outside of the United States, well, they have their primary currency, but a lot of countries, they store the United States dollar as their reserve currency. That's why the US dollar is accepted all over the world. Let's go online. The primary currency used by the criminal underworld is stolen credit card numbers. But the problem is how long is a credit card number good for? Till it gets canceled, right? What is the reserve currency? Anyone want to guess? It's your Social Security numbers. Because how long is a Social Security number good for? Yeah, as long as you've got a pulse, that number is valid. Who here has heard of identity theft? I sure hope we all have. A lot of people say, hey, the best defense against identity theft is to have really crappy credit. That's what I do. But here's the thing. If that number is going to be valid forever, an identity thief, they take that information, they run a credit report on you, find out that you have crappy credit, well, they're really nice folks. What they'll do is they'll take that information and they'll set it aside for a few years. Let it age like a fine wine or a cheese. They'll come back to it later. They're very nice people. They'll come back to it and eventually they'll make some use of it. All right, let's take a look at the anatomy of a worm. Well, an internet worm. On July 1st, 2003, Chinese hackers discovered a security flaw in a Microsoft Windows operating system component. So what did they do? Well, they notified Microsoft. That's kind of how the game is played. Anytime a good guy or a bad guy, hackers or crackers, anytime we find a vulnerability in an operating system, we notify the opponent. Let's go back to WinNuke. WinNuke, that application that you can use to crash a remote computer system, well, before it turned into an application, it was a vulnerability that an individual discovered. He was a computer security researcher, and discovered that, hey, if I did this and then I did that, and I clicked here and typed this and did that, I could cause that machine across the world to crash remotely. Wow. So what did he do? He notified Microsoft. Well, what did Microsoft say? Go away, kid, you're bothering me. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm bothering you? Well, I'll just post this information out to the internet. And what happened was somebody else took that vulnerability and said, this is pretty cool. So they wrote a program to automate the process of crashing remote computers and released it, called it WinNuke. Kids, well, they started downloading it by the thousands and typing in IP addresses and crashing computers all over the internet. And the thing is that Microsoft hadn't even released a patch to protect against this. So if you weren't behind a firewall, your machine would just be crashing. And the thing is that these kids, they're having a heck of a time. I mean, there's virtually no chance that you're going to get caught, because who's going to call the cops because their computer just crashed? I mean, it doesn't happen. So, United States Congress got after Microsoft and said, Microsoft, if somebody's going to tell you that there's a vulnerability in your operating system, you'd better do something about it. Microsoft said, okay. And so they created the security group. Now, when anyone finds a vulnerability within their operating system, we notify security at Microsoft.com, and that's exactly what these hackers did. But just to make sure that we have their attention, anytime anybody finds a vulnerability, they say, Microsoft, you have 2 weeks to release a patch before we put this information out onto the internet. So, kind of lights a fire underneath them, you know, make sure that they're listening. So on July 17th, 2003, Microsoft released a patch for the vulnerability that's called MS-03-026. Now MS-03, well, the MS stands for Microsoft, 03 stands for 2003, 026, that means that it's the 26th vulnerability that they discovered that year. Well, this particular vulnerability was in the RPC DCOM component of all versions of Microsoft Windows. Okay, RPC DCOM, that stands for Remote Procedure Call Distributed Component Object Model. All versions of Microsoft Windows, well, that means that this one vulnerability affected all versions of Windows 95, Windows NT 4.0, Windows 98, Windows ME, Windows 2000, Windows XP, Windows 2003. If you were running any of those versions of Microsoft products, software, you were affected by this bug. Okay? Now, when Microsoft releases patches, they release, you know, a patch a week. Usually it's on a Wednesday. And when Microsoft released the information about this patch, well, the hackers, they released the source code. Now, as a security expert, when I receive these dozens of security alerts per week, I like to be able to take a look at it and go, is this serious? You know, or can it wait? Because everybody is, you know, breathlessly in a panic saying, oh, you need to fix this right now. You know, I want to be able to analyze it myself to say, you know, okay, we need to focus our attention on this, or, you know, this person just needs to take their medication and calm down. Okay? Well, on this particular vulnerability, when I took a look at this, I looked at it and I just went, holy cow, because this was a huge vulnerability. I mean, massive. All you had to do was just launch this against any computer system. And once it exploited that computer system, you would be sitting at that computer's command prompt. I mean, this was the most brutally effective vulnerability that I've ever seen in all of my years of working with computer security. Well, I started telling my customers, stop everything that you're doing, start patching. Okay? And I watched as soon as the hackers got a hold of that source code, they went, oh, this will make a very nice worm. And so they immediately set to work turning it into a worm. And they started emailing it back and forth. And I participate in these news groups, the hacker underground, if you will, where, I watch them emailing this source code back and forth, and watched them as they kind of perfected the vulnerabilities and made it work on different operating systems and made sure that it was, working efficiently. And what they did is they took this one vulnerability and they bolted onto the front end of it a self-propagating mechanism so that it would automatically infect PCs, and then bolting onto the back end of it a Trojan horse that would turn every single one of these infected computer systems into a spam server. And I watched them as they were putting this together, and I wasn't the only one watching. On July 31st, feds warn of a broad internet attack. Government and industry experts consider brewing hacker activity a precursor to a broad internet attack that would target enormous numbers of computers vulnerable from a flaw in Windows software from Microsoft Corporation. You can see that the feds are watching the hackers too. And I had to laugh when I logged into the underground and somebody had posted a message, "Oh no, the feds are on to us. Activity on the internet. That's us, right?" It's like, yeah, genius, we're talking about you. We're watching you. And then wouldn't you know it, on August 11th, Windows Worm starts its spread. A worm that takes advantage of what some security experts have called the most widespread Windows flaw ever has started spreading, fulfilling the predictions. A lot of people say that, oh, there's nothing you can do to protect yourself against a worm. Well, that's absolutely not true. If your computer system was patched, this worm would have no effect on you. But you would always, here in this situation, you had about a 20-day window from the time that the patch was released to the time that the worm came out. If, during that time frame, you patched your computer system, you'd be safe. If you didn't, you wouldn't. Simple as that. However, an antivirus package, that will not protect you from a worm. At least not during the initial phases of a worm. See, once a worm starts spreading, that's when the antivirus companies go, okay, that's what the worm looks like. And they create a signature off of the behavior of that worm. And then they update their antivirus package. Your antivirus package has to go out to their site, download the update, and then you'd be protected through your antivirus package. But until then, you were just as vulnerable as anybody else. Well, once this started spreading, it spread like a digital bullet. Within 24 hours, it had infected millions of computer systems. And just like that, the spammers were back in business. Later that same year, hijacked PCs blamed for a third of spam. PCs that have been compromised by Trojans are being used by spammers to relay vast amounts of email and avoid detection. 1/3 of all spam circulating the web is relayed through PCs that have been compromised by remote access Trojans. Whose computers are that? Yours. I'd be willing to bet that a fair number of you in this room right now on your home computers, they are currently infected with a Trojan horse. This article says 1/3 of spam on the internet. I would say now it's about 80%. 80% of the spam on the internet is coming from home computer systems that are infected with Trojan horses that have not been getting patched. Is there any doubt in anyone's minds that you are the target? They're making money off of you folks.